Hey everybody, and welcome to Schoolism Interviews. And before every interview, I tell you about one of the amazing courses that you get when you subscribe to Schoolism. You get over 50 plus courses, and so today's course is actually my course. It's Speed Sketching Animals with me, Bobby Chu. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to play you a quick video before we get started. Okay, here it goes. To me, the hardest thing to understand as an artist has always been the sketching phase. And that's because the initial sketch is usually completely covered by the time the painting is done. So you never really get to see the artist's process for the initial sketch and what that involves. Even if I was able to get a really good look at the sketches, I would never really understand how an artist was able to just draw a few circles and somehow, almost like magic, it turns into a squirrel or something. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who has experienced this challenge of understanding the sketching phase. So in my new course, Speed Sketching Animals, I'm not just going to be showing you how to sketch several different animals quickly and purposefully, but I'm also going to explain my thoughts, reasoning, and techniques behind all the various marks I make along the way. While our main subjects are going to be animals in this course, you'll be able to apply the sketching techniques and methods I use for your own personal artwork as well. All you have to do is just watch the videos, draw along with me. I've constructed these lessons in a way that will be doable and understandable for beginners, but also challenging and engaging enough for professionals so that artists of all skill levels will have something to take away from this course. I've also included my own drawings for each of the homework assignments, so I'll be doing the homework with you that you'll be able to refer to as you work through your own homework. And you'll be able to download them to keep them as reference for your own personal work too. This course isn't a general how to sketch animals course, but more like how I sketch animals. So get your sketchbooks and tablets ready, and I'll see you on schoolism.com. Now for critiqued versions of my course, we're going to do things differently. We'll be meeting up live, online, and drawing together in real time. Yes, drawing together. I would literally be drawing on the same drawing as you. I hope you can make it. I look forward to drawing with you very soon. Okay, so my amazing guest, Scott Thigpen, has worked for clients such as Wall Street Journal, Sony Pictures Animation, Penguin Books, Coca-Cola, DreamWorks. But the reason I really wanted to get Scott Thigpen on here is to share his story. We actually got straight into talking, and then I just asked him, do you want to just continue and we'll just kind of do the interview this way? So we're going to start off right into the conversation with Scott Thigpen. Please enjoy. Yeah, but you're saying Shane Glines. Wow, that's cool. That's
Yes.
back a ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He was, it was just like, I was like, just going through the internet trying to find anything that was about art.
Hmm.
It's so hard, because basically you had to get through all that furry stuff, that is artistic, but not what I was looking for. And I just saw a forum one time called The Drawing Board, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I was like, oh my God, where does this treasure trove of artists come from? And so,
Right.
and it's so funny. I still meet artists from there from time to time, 20 something years later.
Yeah, and then later it became the drawing board
Yes.
.org, I think. Did you
Hmm.
know Shane Glines at all?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We're acquaintances. I wouldn't say friends, but we've, he's been at conventions that I was at conventions at the same time. And we ended up just chit chatting a little bit.
Wow. Um, yeah, do you want to just keep going and we'll just kind of do the interview right now? Because I tend
Sure.
to, just kind of chat it out regardless.
Okay, sure. That's fine. Um, yeah. So, I mean, to back up a little bit, I graduated college without an art degree. It was in philosophy and religion, which meant my only job options were McDonald's or Wendy's, basically, with that
Wow.
degree. It's just not a lot to get from
Because
it.
you grew up in Alabama?
I did. I grew up in North Alabama, so very religious, conservative background. Nothing wrong with that. Just just not. It didn't fit me very well. So I once I got into the big city, which was Birmingham, Alabama, at the time, then it was it was just I realized I really when I was a kid, my mom and dad took me to see Jungle Book. I think they'd re-released it again, and I'll never forget just watching. It was like, this is what I want to do with my life. Period. I don't know what this is, but I love it. And that was like my first Disney movie I ever saw, and it was shortly Disney had passed away during the making of that movie. In fact, the trivia to that is the eulogy that Baloo gives, or that Bagheera gives Baloo at the end, is actually a eulogy to Disney. So I always thought that was kind of cool. Um,
Wow.
so growing up in a small southern town, nobody knew anything about animation whatsoever. Everybody was just, they were like, well, yeah, that's cool, but artist, they call them starving artists for a reason. You make no money at that. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I still want to do it. Even if I'm hungry, that sounds great.
That's kind of
So,
odd, though. I just want to kind of stop there and just kind of be like, and I love it, by the way.
mhm,
I'm just
okay.
saying that you're a special person just from that sentence where it's like, or those, the little story where I'm assuming the town that you were in, was it over 1 million people or under?
Oh my God, 1,500 people growing up.
1,500 people.
Yes. Yeah, it
Pretty
was
much
tiny.
zero artists, professional
Yes.
artists around,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. We
And
had a,
you see the Jungle Book, and
mhm,
you don't know what this is. We've all experienced that. I've experienced that. I saw it and I was like, that's amazing. Not for,
mhm.
I don't know. I have no opportunities to do that. That's the thing that went in my head, and then I forgot about it for years. Right? Just happened to stumble upon education that led me to, blah 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 blah. But for you, you don't even have the education around in your
No.
town, right? You're studying religion, you're studying whatever else, and you're dreaming about doing art.
Yes, yeah, it was that was something else crazy because most people that like I was the token artist in the town. Like if anybody needed anything, they would come to me. There were
But
two
I
other
I
artists.
just wanted to kind of, sorry, Scott,
No, no, no,
because
no.
I want to be thorough and I'm really interested in how you think. There's something weird and special and beautiful with that. Everybody does not believe in you and thinks that you're doing the wrong thing. People that care about you think that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing the wrong thing.
Yes.
Um, so many people are inclined to kind of listen to these people.
Oh, oh, cool. Well, thank
What
you.
what's is that part of your DNA where it's like if it doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense to everybody else, you still can't follow it?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. It just, I mean, I follow all artist stereotypes. March to a beat of drummer, a different drummer, a little quirky at times. And it goes well. My wife is a little quirky as well. So our quirks fit together. But yes, yeah, even like when I was a kid, of course, like people would say I'm right and that's right. And when you're a little kid, everything's black and white. But even then, things would bug me, and and I would be like, I mean, you could tell, like even as a kid in school, most of my notes were drawings, which was actually pretty good because I could remember things that way. Like if I had to draw or if I had to remember something about Abraham Lincoln and dates, if I just drew it out, I could remember it a whole lot better because I'm a visual thinker. So that was I had an art teacher who did her damnedest to try to teach us still lives and stuff like that in high school. And of course, in high school, all you want to do is draw women from Sports Illustrated magazine, not from not a stupid still life, but boy, if I could go back in time and draw those over and over and over again, I would. But youth is wasted on youth. Um, so I moved on. I went to college. Same thing. I barely graduated just because academics and me are just not really merged together very well. And so I went. Um, during college, I would just draw and draw, and anytime I could take an elective, I would take art. I was under a scholarship for another degree, and I couldn't break to art, or I'd break the scholarship and it'd be out. Then went to grad school and was in the middle of grad school, and my teacher called me in one of the subjects, and he said, "Do you know what your grade is in here?" And I was like, "I don't know, like 70 or something." He's like, "You have a 45." And I started crying, and he's like, "You hate it here, don't you?" I was like, "Yes, I just want to be an animator." He's like, "Then go be an animator and drop out." And I wrote a letter to my parents about grad school and just said, "Hey, look, I hate this. It is not what I want to do. I'm dropping out. I'm really sorry. I'm sure I'm a big disappointment." To my surprise, my parents were really cool about it. And they were like, "Well, go be an animator, but, it's going to be a long road." And it was a really long road.
Like on a
Uh,
scale of 1 to 10, I'm sure they're very proud of you now. And very much, what I'm asking is because like many people can relate to things where it's like they didn't have any artists around them.
mhm.
And, my parents thought that they were doing the right thing by saying, "I don't know about that, son," and I'm being kind about that one. But what was it like for you? Like, let's kind of put a rating on this. A scale of 1 to 10, how upset were they, with you about kind of dropping out at
Oh, they were
first?
disappointed. Maybe on a one being the best, 10 being, they were actually horrified. They were more on like a 3 or 4,
Oh,
they were
okay.
just kind of bummed. No, they were just like, well, you got to follow your own path. And it was a much more painful path. Had I stayed in grad school, I could have gotten a job,
And when you
and
asked them this, did you already drop out or you're
I
thinking
was
about dropping out?
no, I was dropping out. I was going to drop out regardless if they'd said anything. Just like, no, you have to stay in there because
Okay,
I
so they didn't feel like there was some hope to steer you back on the track.
no, no, I'm
Okay,
sure
because
they
that makes a difference.
yeah.
Once they really feel like, okay, yeah, this person is doing this regardless, then
Yep.
they'll ease up a lot of times. Okay, sorry, I don't want to.
No, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
So all this has happy ending. It gets a little darker before it gets brighter. So just stick with me on this. So I dropped out and I was like, okay, first things first, draw. So, and like I was 22, 23, and my art wasn't fabulous. I'd drawn from every Disney book that I'd ever gotten when I was a kid, and everybody and their mother who's an artist had the art of drawing the Marvel way, and I would do that, and I was like, who needs to know this line of action and all these boxes? I'll just draw cool Spider-Man stuff. Come to find out, that's not very marketable. And so there's this thing called I want to be an artist, and then there's the need for money and paying bills, and that got to be where I was like, well, I all of a sudden don't have a free ride anymore, so I would take any job I could find just to be able to draw in the evenings and not have any responsibilities really at work. So I took dead end jobs. I was a bill collector. That was awful. I really learned people like
Yikes.
to lie and scream to you. I scooped poop. I was a vet tech for dogs, and basically they just stuck me outside to walk dogs and scoop their poop. And I worked in a tech firm later on, which was a level above hell. Just because I'm not a programmer or anything like that, but I tried. And I worked at way back when, before FedEx bought it, there was Kinko's copy shop, and then FedEx bought it and shut it down. Just became FedEx shipping center. But there, I worked the graveyard shift, so I'd work in the evening at the copy shop, and then during the day, if I was awake, I would draw. And once I got serious, I started taking figure drawing lessons. And again, we're talking, this is Birmingham, Alabama, which is a city, one of the smaller big cities in the United States, comparatively speaking. I'm in Austin now, so it's like, Birmingham's super tiny compared to Austin. And so I would, once I realized, well, I guess I need to get serious about this if I'm going to get in the animation industry. And so there was Hercules had just come out, and I put together this, I took every piece of art that I'd ever drawn and I stuffed it in a portfolio. And since I worked at the coffee shop and I had unlimited resources, um, I would go to the coffee shop and I would just make print after print of my portfolio and I'd spiral bound it. And at the time when I was researching, I found 36 animation companies around the world. So I sent 36 different portfolios to these places. And this is pre-internet. I mean, well, we had internet, but it was dial up and it was a joke, so I mailed everything and like 6 weeks went by and I started getting portfolios back and just saying rejected, rejected. Like DreamWorks had just finished Prince of Egypt, and that got they rejected me. And then I got a call from Disney, which was like a dream. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna hire me. I was all excited. And the lady went through the portfolio and she was really nice about it, but she's like, you're just not what we're looking for. It's like you really should brush up on your skills. And I was just so crestfallen, like 36 uh portfolios, 36 rejections. Oh wait, no, one did call back and say, hey, we're interested in you, but they were an adult entertainment and I just was not. I was like, yeah, that's really not my thing. So I was pretty let down. And this is the dark part. The bills were starting to come in, and a little known thing during the late '90s, we were in a mini recession, and so it was a time that wasn't, jobs were just, especially luxury jobs, what I call them, illustration, animation, art in general, were not in demand. And so I did anything, any person who's confused and had kind of a weird background, I tried to commit suicide, which was an easy way out. And fortunately, fortunately, I failed really hard at that one. So I tried to wrap my car around a telephone pole, and that did not work. But that was like the best worst thing that could have happened, because I spent a week trying to get my, I got help and therapy and
How old were you at the time?
maybe 26, 27. But this is why I never roll my eyes at being almost 50 now. When I was 26 or 27, I thought life was over. Like I'm old, and 30 sounded like dinosaur land, and was heading towards that. I was like freaked out, and I was like, well, this is it. There's really no reason to live, after that. And of course, 49-year-old me wish I could go back and beat some sense into my head. But, I was suffering with a lot of depression. I was kind of a subpar artist at the very most. And so that was a harsh reset in my life. But then I would just started drawing just for me. I stopped trying to, I was just like, well, obviously I'm not good enough to be in animation. I'll just draw for me. And so locally, when you're an artist in a city, a small city like Birmingham, there's not many artists. There are plenty, but they're not many. And I had drawn a couple of funny things, and somebody at Compass Bank saw it, and they said, well, at Compass, the BBVA now, which they just got bought by PNC. But the bank said, hey, we really liked that thing you did. We're having a barbecue, and could you draw some pigs barbecuing and also in a YMCA outfit, because we're going with a YMCA theme? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to. And they paid $800 for that. And that was like in the late 90s. I was like, oh my God, I'm filthy rich. Somebody actually paid for 3 or 4 hours of my time. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll go the route of like trying to illustrate. I was like, I see a bunch of illustrations and they're terrible. I'll do that. And I had no idea what route to go with that. And so I started calling agents. And of course, I got rejected by all of them. And I would submit my work to art directors at magazines. Again, if you were lucky, you could fax, but mainly I had to mail things and do cold calls. And of course, I got hung up on or yelled at. I called Vanity Fair magazine and got cussed out. That was fun. And cussed out for bugging them, the art director. But anyway, so what I did was like, well, obviously I didn't do things right. so what can I do to stand out? And so I went to the Container Store in Atlanta and bought a bunch of little Chinese takeout boxes. And gosh, this may be some cultural appropriation now. But anyway, I made a whole Chinese takeout menu of my work. So everything was rolled up in little scrolls, and I had little fortune cookies that I took tweezers and pulled out the
Oh,
fortune and
cool.
stuck another one and said, "You'll be successful with Scott Thigpen." And the menu had the things that I
Wow.
would do. And it was so silly, but I sent it out to, gosh, I must have done 20 or 30 or 40 of these boxes. And again, it was before the me generation of taking pictures of everything. So I have no pictures of this to show. And I sent them out everywhere. And nothing for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from like Atlanta Magazine saying, "Hey, I got your Chinese takeout box. Other than the mess that it left all over my desk, are you available to do a cover for a magazine?" I was like, "Well, hell yeah, I am." Yeah. And so I did that. And then within 2 days of each other, two agents called and said, "Well, we want to represent you. We got your little Chinese box. We thought that was clever. Would you be interested in that?" And then I got to put them in a bid war between the two, going, "Well, I don't know. You're going to take like 30% of each paycheck." This person said 25. So, I was able to kind of like work them against each other. And then I got represented. And that led to the Wall Street Journal. And that was the really scary one. They said, "Hey, the Wall Street Journal wants to start using you. The art director will call you tomorrow." And I spent all night long trying to flatten out my accent because I was like, it's silly now to think about it, but like I was like, oh gosh, I sound like such a hick. And New York is going to call tomorrow, and
No, I
oh my
totally
gosh.
understand that though. I when I first started traveling, people would notice my Canadian accent, and I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know I had an accent, eh?
Yes,
Or whatever.
yes.
And then, yeah,
What are
I
you
totally
talking about?
understand that. I totally understand that. Yeah.
So I did that. I worked all night going, okay, don't use a diphthong like Southerners. We put a syllable where there's not supposed to be syllables, like the word cake. We will say cake. So like I worked so hard at doing that. And the next day, the lady called, Heather was her name, and she was more Southern than I. She was raised in South Carolina, and she's like,
Fantastic. Turn it
I
up.
know. I was like, oh my God, I'm so relieved. She's like, oh no, most people think Southern accents are cute, so you're fine. So now I use this to my advantage. But anyway, so that happened, and because of the drawing board, I had met, several people that just, it was like the gift, it still keeps on giving. There's been a few times people have reached out today saying, "Hey, you may remember me from the drawing board. I work with X Studio."
Wow.
And one did, and his name was John, and I can't think of his last name, but he said, "Hey, I'm contracting for DreamWorks, and Shrek is doing for their next movie, they're doing an interactive DVD. Would you be willing to work on it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And they said, "Well, so what it is the storybook, the very first Shrek where he's flipping through and he rips off this piece of storybook and he wipes his ass with that." So with me, they said, "Well, we have all these pictures. We want to do a trivia game of all the stories from the storybook. We need you to mimic the work from that." And because I worked in Adobe Illustrator so much, it was a piece of cake to do it. So I got to work with DreamWorks through a contract company, and I was all excited because they flew me out to LA. I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be so cool." And I got out there, and they put me up in Compton, which all I knew from Compton was NWA Straight Out of Compton. It fit the bill. And then the studio, where I didn't even get to go to the DreamWorks studio. It was a satellite studio that was on the beach between two strip bars, and it was just kind of seedy and everything. And the closest celebrity I met was the voice stand-in for Eddie Murphy's Donkey. And that was it. So I didn't even meet any celebrities, and I sat under halogen light and used Adobe Illustrator to draw stuff for Shrek. But I get to work for, I got to put Shrek down on my portfolio, and generally I just kind of let the word speak for itself. Most people just plug in, it's like, oh, I must have been with a lead animators or something, which is not true, but it's always worked to my advantage. And then so after that, for about a decade, I had a pretty steady life of illustrating for magazines and newspapers, a lot of newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, Atlanta Journal Constitution, New York Times were some, and then a lot of local papers. And, so I did those. I did children's books. And, it wasn't really the agent. It was more me. I hate to use the word hustle because that's so overused, but just being consistent with calling people. And I just wasn't afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey, my name's Scott, I'm an artist. And of course, I don't think of myself as the best artist. I just know I'll be one to show up and do your project for you. And people I found out really like that, and also like people they can work with. So sure, divas are always going to get their jobs, and probably the high end jobs. But I found being a not diva and saying, hey, this is a team effort, let's work together, worked out really well. So that was fine, and everything was going well. And I'd gotten a job with McGraw-Hill, and it was the biggest job. I never had double-digit numbers, and this was to the tune of about $40,000 to do 90 books. So when you do the math, I completely got ripped off. But anyway, it was 40 grand. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best money I've ever made in my life. And that was 2007, which is the recession and the introduction of the iPhone. And so the recession hit, and like I lost clients left and right, along with McGraw-Hill. They went belly up for a little while. So I got paid, but I only got paid just a little bit out of it. There was a lot of legal stuff with that involved. And I was watching clients just dry up, and I couldn't find any work anywhere. So I was terrified. It's like, oh my God, I'm back, to having to do dead end jobs again. And that's when I picked up a job as a graphic designer. These people said, hey, listen, we know you know how to use graphic design software. So will you work for us? We can't pay you a lot, but we can pay you something. And this was in the middle of the recession, so they're just barely hanging on. And one of their clients was Sweetwater Brewery, that makes the Atlanta craft beer, all their Sweetwater stuff. And one day they walked in to deliver the check like they did every week, and they just came in with cases of beer, and they said, listen, we are bankrupt. We have no money to pay you. And we all looked at them horrified. They're like, well, we have all this beer we can give you. And we're like, yeah, okay, I can live off beer. So that's how hard it got for a little while. And I got down to the point where I had a little bit of money left from savings. I had kind of burned through everything just trying to stay afloat. And so I looked at in Atlanta, there was a homeless shelter I used to volunteer at, and I would go there and give sandwiches and I just have always liked working with the homeless. And so they had a deal there that if you worked full time for them, they'd give you a stipend and free room. I was like, oh man, this may actually save me. So I got pretty close to moving into a homeless shelter, and that was at like 36 or 37 years old. And so I through happenstance ended back up in. This is when I lived in Atlanta, but I moved back to Birmingham and just had some fortune to be in a situation to live in a place that would float me. And I'm going to take a little segue. This was right around 40. And for those that are under 40 that are listening to this, and anybody that has been over 40, you hit that midlife crisis mess. And so drawing kind of had taken a back seat. I was now working I was teaching at the University of Alabama at Birmingham design. I just through happenstance got a job there. It wasn't a great paying job, but I got to teach a little bit there. And so instead of having a red Corvette and a secretary to run off with as a midlife crisis, I didn't have any money. So I picked up biking, and then I got into competitive mountain biking. And then, and this has to do with art. It just doesn't sound like it. There was a race called the Tour Divide, which starts in Banff, Canada. And it's you crisscross through the Continental Divide on trails and off-beaten roads, not even real roads, all the way down to New Mexico, or the border of Mexico. So I was like, well, that sounds like a hell of a thing to do. So with no money and very little security, I trained up to do this race as my 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 way of having a midlife crisis. So
Wow.
I did that, and it took 21 days. And
Are
during
you
that
married
time,
at this time?
I was with somebody, which didn't last too long after that.
Oh, okay.
Not the smartest move in the world to do, but so somewhere along the line of being in the middle of the woods, surrounded by like grizzly bears and torrential downpours and snow and heat, I was like, wow, I really miss art. And so when
That's
I
what you thought.
yeah, so
You weren't
when I
thinking
got
like,
home,
oh my God, I'm gonna die out
yes,
here.
yeah, I'm gonna die. I miss art. So when I got home, um, I decided to just draw and be intentional about drawing. I was like, I really want to be in the animation industry, so I'm gonna give it a shot. And I still didn't know anything about the pipeline or how animation works. I know all about illustration and how that works. I was like, surely it's got to be sort of the same. So I got involved and started taking a class here or there, which, growing up, and I hate to say kids today, but had as a child, had I had YouTube, oh my God, that would have made the difference between night and day because there's so much free tutorials on there.
Hmm.
And then there was some weird uh, group that cropped up that was like, well, I'll give this a shot. And this is about 4 or 5 years ago. It's like something called Schoolism. So there's your
Yay.
plug for the day. I was like, well, I guess I'll try that. And I was like, well, what's a visual design? Well, what's
Oh,
this?
wow.
What's modeling? And well, I mean, I knew what modeling was, but I had no idea what biz dev was, or I knew the word concept art, and that was about it. And so through a bunch of courses on Schoolism, that was big. And I'll circle back around because there's a huge one about that I'll get to in a minute. And so um, I started taking classes just through that and one-offs of people I would see here and there. And I would take a few classes there. And I was taking classes with one guy he would evaluate my work every other Saturday. And I got interested in doing backgrounds and environments. And I said, what do you think? And he goes, well, honestly, these are pretty amateurish and it's a really competitive field. Are you really wanting to do that? And I was like, well, I'd like to give it a shot. So that was about 6 years ago or so, and then I had a breakup with somebody I was with, and met my just shortly thereafter I'd met my now current wife, and I was just kind of doodling around, and she said, "Hey, do you draw anymore?" And I was like, "Yeah, here and there, I want to, but it's so competitive now, and I just feel washed up, and I'm like 45 now, 44, and." She's like, well, will you just draw me some? She's like a crazy cat lady. She's like, I heard there's that thing you did one time called Inktober. Would you do it, but just do it with cats? And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll do that. So I committed to doing Jake's, Inktober back in 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. And drew a bunch of cats. And somewhere along like day 15 or 16, I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. And I was working at a tech firm as a designer, and the money was good, but I wasn't happy at all. And so my wife and I now had moved to Austin, and I was one of the first people to work from home because the company let me do that. And so not the pandemic hit, and it was always just Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and I was having Zoom fatigue, and my wife said, "Hey, listen, I'm doing okay. Why don't you go ahead and just quit and pursue art? Because I know you want to." I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like so tough. She's like, well, just think about it. And I was like, well, I guess I better get some mentors. So I picked up, took forever to get in, but I picked up Ty Carter and Lip Camarella as Lip's at Netflix and Ty is at Netflix and maybe moving somewhere else as art directors. And so both of them, seasoned professionals in the industry, started, teaching and teaching. And I was like, Lip had said, he goes, hey, you're doing really good. You should be able to get a studio pretty quick. And I was like, well, I don't know, Lip, why don't you hire me? And he's like, well, he said something. He sort of downplayed it, and it got me kind of mad. It's like, well, if I'm so good, according to you, then why aren't you hiring me? And he put it some way that really meant so much to me, which was, he said, look at it this way: pretend your art is bread. You go into the grocery store and you are cooking out for the 4th of July and you need hot dog buns. You don't need bagels. You don't need buns, hamburger buns. You don't need potato bread. You don't need like whole wheat, gluten free bread. You need hot dog buns. So you're going to go in the grocery store and buy hot dog buns. And then you get your choice of what brand and what smells the best. And he said, that's just like the animation industry. You're a piece of bread. This animation company may be looking for hamburger buns. And if you're not a hamburger bun kind of guy, then they don't need you for that show. And it made so much sense. I was like, okay. So then I started really sort of focusing on what I want to do in the industry, and the goal was to be in the to be in the animation industry at least before I hit 50. And so at like last year, I had worked for a couple of small studios on some pilots, nothing big, but enough that I was like, hey, listen, I'm working, I'm actually getting to work. And I got a video game called and said, would you do some concept work for us? And I said, sure, yeah. And I'd just gotten a VR system and started learning Adobe Medium, which is, for concept work, you can just put together something immediately, and got involved in Blender and really, really gotten involved in doing backgrounds. So I would do that, and I would religiously post to my website. I always kept that updated. I always posted to LinkedIn and, of course, Instagram. And, at first I was worried about, well, I must have 80 million fans, and then I was like, why the hell would I care about 80 million people I don't even know? So I just started caring about posting things for people that like my stuff and not really worrying about the numbers, which was really good because it's easy to get, sucked into that. And so I would do that and nothing. And I kept a spreadsheet of any recruiters that I'd talked to. And it was just like in the 90s and early 2000s, instead of cold calling, I would just message people. And I didn't just message saying, hey, I want in the industry. I would just say, hey, my name's Scott. I have some specific questions to ask you about the animation industry. Could you take a minute and talk to me? And I would get some recruiters would have a meeting, some wouldn't. Most of the time nobody even respond. And that was just life. And so I would get some small commissions here or there, enough to keep afloat. And then an email came through, I guess about 4 or 5 months ago, and said, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm from Sony Animation. Would you be willing to work on a movie with Jindy? They didn't even have to say his last name. And so like I called, I was like, yeah, I believe I'm free to work on Jindy's stuff. And they said, sure. And said, well, we'll start you with Sony Animation in a month. And it's going to be a feature coming up. And I said, okay, sure. Yeah, that sounds great. And like, I was like jumping up and down and excited about it. And they called the next, or like 2 or 3 days later, they called and they said, hey, listen, we've had a delay. Can it be a month and a half out? And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. And they're like, you're fine. That works for your schedule. I'm like, yes, it's fine, which is good because like 2 days later, and I haven't really said anything publicly about this. I've said things privately. So if they get a hold of this, they'll be like, wow. So 2 days later after that, they said that I'd been working out, exercising. I do that often. And I got off the bike. I said, God, something doesn't feel right. And so long story short, I had a heart attack, which, at the time at age 48, which is last year, I was like, oh my God, I can't be having this, at this age. And so I was in the doctor's office trying to facilitate, I spent a week in the hospital to figure out what's going on, and come to find out genetics and bad luck just contributed to a heart attack. And so the whole time I was like, out of all the things I could have been worried about, I was like, please be better before you start at Sony. Please be better. And I was nervous and worried sick that Sony was going to be a disaster. I wasn't going to be up for the challenge, but they'd hired me for a gig and that lasted for a little while, and we wrapped up and shook hands, and so that brings me to where I'm at currently, which is I'm working doing some private commissions, and the last thing on my bucket list, I have two. One is to go to Tokyo because I've always wanted to go and just see the bright lights down there and their version of Times Square. And to work for Disney would be just so my inner child who saw the Jungle Book will shut the hell up, and it can be a contract job with Disney or it could be full time, doesn't matter. But even if they said, yeah, we just need a blade of grass drawn, that would suffice. So my stupid inner child will shut up. But other than that, I've just been I do a lot of little work for small video games, small clients, and prefer it that way just because they're big clients are great. Working for Jindy was awesome and got to work with Scott Wills, who is a hero of mine, and learned a ton with that. And that is great. But the small ones are great too. So I've been doing just a lot of smaller work, but
Everything has its pros and cons, right, Scott?
yes, yeah. So that's life in a nutshell. With leaving a few things in and out, but that's where I'm at.
That's fantastic. I would love to kind of dive into some of the stuff that you were just mentioning.
Sure.
The ride the divide.
Hmm.
For those that don't know, that's like arguably probably the hardest mountain biking, race or whatever you want to call it. It's so long. I don't even know if you call it a race. It's over
It is.
3,000 miles, right?
Hmm.
3,000 miles. I don't know how many kilometers that is, but that's way over 3,000 kilometers. So
Yes.
do the
Yeah.
math, and it's on a bike. And I believe you don't have a team, you don't have
No.
sponsors, you're by
No.
yourself.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
So
It's a.
for a bunch of that race, like for most of that race, do you even see anybody around you that's also on the race? No,
You do
right?
every so often. There was 181 people that did that race the year I did in 2013. When I got done, there was, I think, finishers were like 50. They just people just. It's a hard race. You just and the
So
biggest
over a
one,
third,
yes,
they
dropped
quit.
out.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I almost quit like several times,
Well,
but
you go from Canada through
mhm,
Canada into the US,
mhm.
past the US into Mexico. Where do you stop?
On the road. Or well, you
No,
weren't on the
like
road.
the final destination.
Oh, Antelope Wells, New Mexico. So that is
Wow.
the borderline of that. And when I got there, I was so loopy and so out of it because I've been baked by the sun all day long that I just kept going through the guardrail. And two of the Mexican border guards, they came out with machine guns and aimed it at me. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." So I like backed up and everything because I didn't go through the gate. I just kind of weaved around, and apparently that was you don't do that. So
Wow.
I guess everything I was making a run across the border. But anyway, yeah, there's no, like the Tour de France looks hard, but the Tour de France, there's a guy in a car next to you squirting water on you and handing you, nutrition. And if your tire is messed up, they put a tire on like an F1 pit crew does. I
Hmm.
didn't have any of that. So like, yeah, I was just basically I'm an introvert. So it was fun.
But you didn't
But
have any formal training. How did
not really.
you learn how to like do any of that kind of stuff? Because like you need to know certain things so that you don't literally die out there, or so that you can finish the race.
Sure. I've got it is exactly like art. It exactly. Everybody, like, I always kind of, I don't smirk, but I've always wanted to mansplain this to people when they say I'm a self-taught artist. And I'm like, we're all self-taught artists. We all had, I mean, you may have a teacher, but you still had to teach yourself how to draw. So when I first started picking up figure drawing again, when I was older, like I was awful. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kept doing it. And so I would hit a snag like, well, how do you draw an arm? And I'd work to figure out how to draw an arm. And the biggest exercise was for me was I would take every morning, I would draw 60 somethings, 60 hands, 60 torsos. And then I did the same thing with biking. It was like, okay, so I got to camp. in the middle of nowhere. I've got to carry a tent. How the hell do you do this? And come to find out, there's all these tools, much like for artists. There's bivy sacks, which are, basically you have a tent that's no bigger than you, and you're basically a bare burrito. You're just zipped up in a little piece of canvas. And there's lightweight sleeping bags, and
So you
there's
use the internet pretty much to like research all
yes.
this stuff.
Mhm. And just like the drawing board of the 90s, I met a group of ragtag people on a forum that would do this race, or newbies that would do the race. And you just ask tons of questions. And I did a lot of training rides. I would go out in the middle of the woods and just purposely get lost. And most of the time at night, because you were riding a lot at night.
How did
And
you
so
train for temperature change?
and I hate the cold. I mean, it's kind of funny right now in Austin, we're supposed to hit 109 degrees today, which sounds awful. And it is bad. And I'm not going to go outside, but if I do, I'm like, but if you put me in like cold weather, uh, like I like it for a moment. Like I like skiing. It's kind of fun, down a slope, but, like the first moment I get cold, I start to, all I want to do is run to a heater. So, pretty much, I'll never forget weathering through all the high mountain passes and the snow. It was hard. I mean, like that's
What
where
are
I'd
you
want to
wearing
quit.
at that point? Like I'm picturing
I
still
don't know.
bike shorts. I don't know. Like you tell me.
You you had I had on the back of my bike. I had a big like a underneath sack that would extend out. For lack of better words, like a condom. I hate to say it that way, but the canvas would roll out. So I had a pair of leggings, a pair of waterproof pants, and a waterproof jacket and armbands. And I was constantly like at the bottom of a mountain, you would take all that off. And as you climbed and sweated, as soon as you started seeing snow, you stopped and you put everything back on. You get to the top, take a break, go down the mountain. By the time you got down the mountain, you were a sweat box again because it's back to being really hot. And you would take all that off, stuff it back in, and keep riding. And that was on off. But the biggest one was by July 4th, I'd gone to South Colorado, and I'd stopped at a little convenience store to get some food. And as I was riding out from the little town, I got back on the trail, and something cold hit my mouth, and then another one, another one. It was freaking snowing. And I remember I was kind of sleep deprived. I had a temper tantrum. I threw my bike across the trail, was screaming at the sky, going, "Really? It's snowing. It's July 4th in South Colorado." So I had a lot of issues with that, but because I had a lot of time to think, and usually the divide is really just long. It's tough. I mean, it really, really is tough. But the main thing that gets people is monotony, because you just see mountains every day, all the time for
Well, it
20,
feels like
25.
it was like the perfect environment for like 10 years of therapy rolled into
Yes.
one kind of
Mhm.
like little race,
And it,
right? Or
and
not
it
little,
was.
Jesus.
And I would think about art the whole time, and I would actually, and this is one thing, especially as a designer, you want to do. I started observing everything. Like I was going, huh, look at that. Shadows are really purple and gray. They're not just black. And I would just go make mental note to remember that and use it in your art the next time. And
Very
and
cool.
I would create scenes in my head of stuff, and that, and so stories would lead to characters would lead to, environments, and all of a sudden I was deeply enmeshed in my head. And so while it was long and tumultuous, at the same time I was able to blunt a lot of that trip by just kind of going off into my head and learning about, or observing things and then translating that into art.
Now, there's one uh, common theme with this, with everything that you've been talking about, your stories, your life, everything, which I feel like is tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have an extreme amount of tenacity. When we look in hindsight, a lot of times we can kind of pick out why. What happened to me to affect me like this? Can
Mm-hmm.
you can you pick something out like that?
Sure. Yeah. That goes back to uh, well, the span of my life. So as a child, because I would think differently or more on a creative side of things. It drove, my parents and teachers just nuts because my parents are very conventional. Everything is a box, everything is a row. Um, and for me, like I never colored inside the lines, I guess. And where my parents, if you gave them a crayon and a coloring book, they would make sure everything was detailed and in the lines. And me, I'm like, wee, and just put it all over. So there was that, but also I alluded to it earlier. I have trouble with like multiple choice tests, being in sterile environments and listening to somebody lecture. I don't learn that way. And math is just hell on earth for me. And I can't do it. And so most of my academic life, high school or grade school, high school, college, was a huge struggle for me because like I couldn't, it got to the point in college, especially, it's like, okay, D is for diploma. D plus is for diploma. Yay. I'm not failing. So, and it was really hard because like, it would make me so mad in college, especially I had all these smart friends. They would not study. They'd stay up all night playing video games or, hanging out, and they would go in and just ace a test. And I would spend all night at the Waffle House drinking coffee and trying to shove in my head all this stuff. And if I passed, it was a miracle. And so through that, and also I've never been afraid to ask anybody anything, especially girls. So I would ask girls out on dates a lot, and I got rejected a lot. And so you learn to deal with rejection, and you learn because I just had a bunch of struggles growing up. Now, when I meet a struggle, it's just like, you just kind of, it's not so much, it's a skill. It's not really, I mean, it's tenacity. I guess we all get some freebies in life, and I got grit and tenacity. But even then, it's like, I look down and go, okay, I've got a blank sheet of paper. I have got to make it into something for this client. Imposter syndrome kicks in. I'm having a bad drawing day. Just those days when you just can't do anything right. And you just kind of go, okay, what's the low hanging fruit here? Well, turn on the program, at least you got one thing going. And so that would be the same thing with cycling. There were days that on that race, it was hot. I'd been sleep deprived. I hadn't had any food in a while, and my water's almost empty. And you would just kind of go, well, I'm far away from society. I could die. What's the one thing that'll keep me from dying? It's like, okay, get on bike, and that was the first thing. Pedal is the second. So you start with low hanging fruit, and you just go from there. And so because I've been so conditioned to have to, it's like, okay, well, I got a multiple choice test. I'm going to really screw this up. So how do I not screw it up? And you just go with little by little. And the big one for me, and I think with a lot of artists, I'm a perfectionist. So like even getting ready for this interview and like sending you over some images, I was like, man, all these suck. This sucks. This is terrible. He's going to laugh me out. And you have to just kind of get through that and go, well, I'm going to submit the images. And if for some reason Bobby Chu just laughs me out of the interview, which of course you would never do that, but it would be good information for me to know this. So like, even when I called Vanity Fair in the 90s and said, hey, I'm an artist, would you consider hiring me? And I spent 5 minutes listening to the guy cuss me out, the art director. I just come on a really stressful day. I was like, okay, note to self, do not call this guy again. Second of all, be more empathetic to people on their days, because they're, all of us are always busy. I'm sure you get many emails and messages saying, how do I get in a studio? Will you hire me? That type of stuff. And, you never really think about ways to approach contacting somebody or making an in, which is, little steps. And so I've always looked at it as tenacity is really just little bitty steps, and all those little steps kind of merge into a big step. And there's a book, and it'll come to my brain in a minute, that I read, that Atomic Habits, that's it, by James Clear, is one of the most amazing books about that. It's not an easy read, but it just talks about all little things laid up to big things. So that's where some of the tenacity comes from, is struggling as a kid, getting a lot of rejects, and learning to just kind of go, okay, well, that person rejected me, but that doesn't mean you're a loser or a terrible artist. It just means that person rejected you. And that's information for you and good information. So that's the way I go with it with the tenacity part.
Fantastic. Yeah, Atomic Habits. I love that book.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe we should offline trade some book lists if you're into those kind
Yeah.
of things.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
I'm constantly into those kind of books.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like self-help. Usually it's the people that don't actually need the help that are reading these self-help books and
Yes.
getting more and more, educated and everything.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really cool. And I feel like, you know, outsider looking in and hearing everything that you said, I feel like a big part of it is really like life was able to strengthen you from a very young age to deal with, you know, things that annoy you, things that disappoint you, things that make you feel bad, and
Hmm.
pretty much to the brink, right? And
Hmm.
that made you pretty much invulnerable now to those kind of things, which, hey, I commend you. That's amazing. That's such a great story to share with everybody. So I want to thank you, Scott, for, all your thoughts and your stories and everything. It's been wonderful. Um, Now, usually I ask, the person I'm interviewing, if you could thank somebody from your past, somebody that did something for you or taught you something that was real special, who would you want to thank and what did they do for you?
Wow. There are so many people, and it's going to be hard. And it's one of those, like, I'm a people pleaser. So whoever I say, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm sorry I let you down. I'm going to go with, and for this interview, especially. So, I took some figure drawing classes from Mike Matisse or Matese, however you say it, his force drawing stuff, and it didn't jive well with me because I'm not a formulaic type person, and his stuff is a little more formulaic. It's good. It's just not. It didn't suit me. But he had some people under him that were teachers, and one was Diego Lucia or Lucia. He's very active on social media, so I can send you his information afterwards. But my wife, as a Christmas present, got me 5 sessions, private sessions with him a long time ago, and I was still dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I deal with imposter syndrome anytime I pick up a pencil, but I was kind of down on myself, and I was like, well, I'm just not drawing as good as you, and so it's going to be really difficult for me to get into any industry. And he's like, hey, none of that thinking that way. And he was like, you're you're fine as is. Your work is fine as is. And he worked with me on not comparing myself and just kind of focusing on me in my artwork and what I like and what I want to do and not adhering to other stuff. And it helps. I mean, I still get on the internet, and when I see somebody's work, I just kind of crumble. You're especially when you post some of your stuff, I'm just like, oh my God. But I don't even have to go, well, he's not good at this or blah, blah, blah to make myself feel better. I just go, well, now this is my art. This is me. This is what I bring to the table. And, maybe I'll never have a million of adoring fans, but that's okay, because art is really, I'm putting it out there to share. And that's what I feel like doing. And it's not a contest or anything. And Diego probably helped me with that more than anything else. He's a hell of an artist and a fantastic teacher, especially if you need to learn like, fundamentals of figure drawing. So, and he was very kind and just here's another book for you. He had recommended a book called Happy by Darren Brown, and I think that's what it's called. And
Darren
it was one
Brown.
of the, I
Wow.
think that's it. He's a magician, and
Oh yeah, I was just thinking it's The
yeah,
Mentalist, Darren
yeah, yeah,
Brown.
yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he talks
Interesting.
about, oh, the book is outstanding, and it was a big change for me to not have to deal with imposter syndrome as much. And I think we all do. And I know we're wrapping up. I'll try to make this short. So my wife is a doctor. and she's been one for 20 years, a physician, and I don't think there's a day that she doesn't wake up and go, and she feels like she's an imposter syndrome, even in the doctor field, and being a decorated doctor for 20 years. And her colleagues are the same. The only people I think in the medical industry that don't have imposter syndrome are surgeons because they have a God syndrome. But anyway, everybody deals with it. And so, the book, Darren Brown's Happy, it was just fantastic. And because like most of the sessions that I had with Diego were not about art, hardly at all. It was about me and him. He's no counselor or psychologist, but he was able to see where I was struggling, which was not with art, but with myself, and sort of gave me some keys to unlock that. So it just, yeah, I can't thank him enough for what he did. And I still kind of hold those values that I learned from that book in his sessions, and that's been, half a decade ago now, give or take. So, anyway, yeah, him would be the one I would thank the most.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you for your amazing stories, and it's been a joy. And how inspiring is that? I hope everybody's inspired from listening to this story. And let us know. Let us know in the comments. I'm sure Scott would love to see. And before you forget, follow him on Instagram. Follow him on social media to keep up with his amazing adventures. Also, Scott, are you going to Lightbox? Just offhand?
I'm really want to. I'm still kind of on the fence
Okay.
about going. I'd like to go. It's not out of my wheelhouse. I'm because my wife is a physician. I get that the COVID's is not as bad as it used to be, but a little nervous about that. And also, I want to have gone to many conventions. I want to make sure that I'm not standing in line for 40 hours just to get turned away if there's a headliner event I want to see. But I really, really want to go. And I had actually thought about applying for a table to showcase my work. And I was just like, so many things got in the way, i.e. a heart attack. When everything was kind of, when you were applying and stuff, I was like, yeah, but I'd love to go. I'd love to meet. There's so many people I'd love to meet and say hello to, and old friends that I've only seen on the internet. So I'm kind of back and forth, but I'll wait till just a little bit later. But it
No
is
worries.
something that
No worries.
I did do Lightbox for the first time virtually, and it was awesome. I recorded every video and took so many notes. My brain hurt so bad after that first year that y'all did it virtually.
All right, everybody. Well, this has been fantastic. And again, Scott, this has been beyond inspiring. 10 out of
Oh,
10. So thank you so
yay.
much.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it a lot. I mean, just to get to meet you from fanboy and everything aside, like it's amazing. Or re-meet, I can't believe you were on there too on the drawing board.
Right, right. Yeah. It's amazing time. All right, everybody, take care and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.